Hello and thanks for watching the 2012 presidential debates. I'm Hannah Tran.
And I'm Katie Spencer. This year's debate is being held between the two tickets, the first of which is Regina Martel with Joe Eden.
And the second being John Dietrick and Peter Muller. Now, both tickets will be asked a series of questions by our mediator, and both of them will have their chance of answering each of the questions.
And tonight's mediator is the Collegian's very own Sam Noblet. Questions from the audience will follow.
And without further ado, like they say, Katie, the debate starts right now.
Welcome to the 2012 ASCSU debate. My name is Sam Noblet, and this is Allison Silt, and we will be moderating today's debate. So let's go ahead and jump right in, just to kind of let you know how it's going to work. We have some questions for both sets of candidates, and we have some for individuals. So from there, first of all, why should students elect you as their next ASCSU president?
Students should elect us for ASCSU president and vice president purely because of our motivation, and our motivation comes down to being passionate about student voice and being a good representative to as many different populations as we can. We acknowledge that there are a lot of different things that people believe in, and we want to make sure that we can be relevant to what students are passionate about. So whatever that means for a student, we're going to do that, and we're going to be the administration that's the most responsive to student need. We also want to make sure that we set that up for success in the future. We don't just want to think about our administration, but we want to think about a vision for as many years as ASCSU is around. Really making sure that administrations in the future seek that student feedback and are relevant to what students are passionate about.
And just as a quick aside, that was Regina Martel and Joe Eden.
I believe the students of CSU should elect Moose and I, president and vice president of CSU, simply because we're going to take CSU in places it's never been. We're bringing outside perspectives to a stagnant organization that hasn't served the students in the best way possible. I believe that we can create a lasting and positive relationship with the Board of Governors that creates the best opportunities for CSU students to succeed in the long run. And like I said before, we bring fresh blood, we bring fresh ideas, and I think we can take. We are people orientated. We like being outside. We like working. We like talking to people, and we are listeners. We listen to the students, and I think that's one of our best qualities that we have is that we listen. We also get things done when it needs to be done in a timely manner, which I think is essential to these positions. And we don't quit. That's one thing that I think really benefits us and will benefit the students of Colorado State University in the long run.
And what would the #1 priority of your administration be? And going with that, which issue do you think is most pressing to CSU students? And that's for both of you.
You guys can start if you'd like.
I'll go. I think what's most pressing to our administration is student fees. For a long time now, it seems like student fees have been on the rise. What we want to do, being newcomers to ASCSU, is bring in a new perspective that really makes sure we optimize student fees. Keep them down so they're the most appropriate for students. Organizations that come in there demanding 5% rises and they only affect 3 to 5% of the student population, that's ridiculous. We want to keep those fees down to a minimum, make sure that the only fees going through are those that are totally necessary.
In our view, the biggest problem or issue that we would need to respond to is state funding for higher education. Right now, students are trying to balance work, academics, on top of burdensome student loans that have never been higher. To respond to that, we want to make sure that we have a presence at the state capitol, that we are constantly seeking that voice at the state capitol to make sure that the student perspective is heard and understood. As far as on campus, we want to make sure that we are the voice of the students and really able to represent students where they haven't been represented before on all different areas of campus.
All right, and so we're going to go ahead and do an individual question here, and this one specifically for Regina. I know that you're heavily involved in the current ASCSU administration. How will you differentiate your tenure as ASCSU president from Derek's, and do you think you need to?
I'm really involved in ASCSU right now, and I actually think that that's one of my biggest qualifications. I think that the Eric and Rachel administration has done amazing things for this university. I think that there are some places that they lacked. I think that we want to focus a lot on the student voice and a lot on how we get that student feedback. I think that that's one of the biggest things that we're going to have to do.
And this next one is for John and Max. So neither of you have held positions in the executive branch of ASCSU before. Do you think this experience is necessary to hold these positions, and why or why not?
That is correct. Max nor I have held positions in the executive branch. Is that something that is beneficial? I think yes, but that's not something that we can overcome. I am close with several previous executives that have been in that ASCSU office, and they've coached me and they've told me a lot of good things in the past, and I think that I can use that to my benefit in serving the students. You know, I think what we really want to change in ASCSU is the culture, and you know, working together and getting over some of our personal relationships. So I think that's what we want to stress is, you know, let's bring in previous presidents, previous executive members, and really all work together in building a foundation for the students.
All right, and we have another question for both of you. The ASCSU president is tasked with managing an almost $2 million a year budget. What experience do you have in budgeting, and what unique skills or qualifications do you bring to that task?
That's a great question. And it's the students' money as well. Specifically, last year I spent my time in my fraternity as the programming vice president, and that requires myself to budget for every function, every social, every philanthropy event, and every community service event to the last dollar, so our house can operate and we can eat and actually live in that house, and so we don't get shut down. I think that really served me working with different companies outside of our house, such as bus companies, different bars, different philanthropy organizations, and making sure we're optimizing every dollar. And I have that actually budget right here, and I've been going over it continuously, just making sure everything's in order. Eric's administration presented a great budget that put us in a great position, whoever's elected, that I think really will help out.
So in the 2010-2011 administration, I served as the director of Ramride. With that, I had to budget the largest budget in ASCSU and also had to manage that department. I think that gave me a lot of responsibility as far as making sure that every weekend Ramride could run and every weekend we could pay for cars and pay for food and pay for all the million other things that go into Ramride. I think that gives me a lot of that experience. I also think that I'm extremely fiscally responsible, and I completely understand that every dollar that we use is coming from students, and we need to be really responsive to that and make sure that what we're doing benefits the most students possible.
And the ASCSU president works about 60 hours a week on average, and that doesn't include evening events and weekend programs and whatever other duties might arise. Are you prepared for that workload, and do you think that you can handle it alongside school and what other obligations you have?
I think that 60 hours, that workload is something unique and an opportunity that you should be excited to take. I'm excited about working. I like working. I like getting things done. I like working for other people and serving other people. Do I think my school might get in the way? You know, you have to remember you're here while you're here at CSU, and that's for academics. And it's really about optimizing every minute and managing your schedule. I don't think I would consider running for this position if I didn't know I would be fully capable of doing that.
I think that because I'm so passionate about what we're running for, that would get me up every single morning, ready to come to work and ready to be as good of a student voice as I possibly can be. I think that 60 hours a week is a lot, but I also think that it's something that I completely expect and I'm ready for. I've mapped out my academic plan to make sure that I can still graduate on time as well as keep a balanced academic load. I think that being a student keeps you in touch with all of the different issues that students have to face, as well as keeping focused on what ASCSU would need from me.
All right, I have a quick follow-up for John specifically. In your collegian profile, you're quoted as saying, "Work is for Monday to Friday, and family and friends and self are for the weekend." The ASCSU president's duties often extend into the weekends. Are you prepared for that?
I'm aware that they do extend into the weekends. Obviously, the whole weekend can't be just all fun and games and time with your family and friends. So I am prepared for that, and cutting back socially and with my family and friends, I am prepared for that. But I'm not going to forget where I come from.
And this one is for Regina and Joe. ASCSU is often criticized for being out of touch with the average CSU student. John and Max boast a huge amount of experience outside of CSU. Aren't these the kind of credentials kind of necessary to make student government more accessible to the campus community?
Yeah, you know, honestly, I completely agree with that. And I think that ASCSU has made huge mistakes in the past with not being a more inclusive organization. And I think that really reaching out to the student body and attending student forums and going out and seeking that feedback actively from student organizations and things is really going to boost involvement in ASCSU and really help us connect with the student body. So rather than being our own exclusive organization, really opening those doors so that we can get the most diverse array of feedback possible. You know, right now, in Senate, we only have 21 Senate seats filled out of 36 Senate seats, and I think that that's really atrocious. I think that there's so much room for improvement that it's absolutely insane, and I think that going out to those student organizations and letting students know what it is that we do and how they can get involved is really going to open up that process.
Sorry about that. Two campaigns have very different opinions as to how to optimize Ramride next year, and specifically different ideas about the future of Ramride return. Could you both elaborate on this?
So, as I've said before, I was the director of Ramride for 2010-2011. This has given me first-hand experience of seeing where Ramride continues to fail and where Ramride can improve in the future. We will be having more incentives for volunteers. If you can't fill every single car that we rent, then you're wasting student fees, and that's not what we're here for. So making sure that we can fill those fill the cars every weekend will really help the efficiency of Ramride, and that comes from making sure that volunteers understand the importance of what that is. Also kind of starting this culture of what Ramride is as far as just if you volunteer, it pays it forward so that you'll get a ride in the future. Just starting that culture shift of what Ramride is and what it means to be a Ramride volunteer and that you're giving back to the CSU community. We want to keep Ramride Return. We think it's a brand new program and that it just wasn't given the right opportunity to start. We want to make sure that it's marketed well, that it's consistent, and with a year under our belt, we have the opportunity to make it better. What this involves, or what this allows us to do, is have the entire package of a safe ride program. So Ramride's mission is to be a safe, non-judgmental ride home for CSU students, and the incentive to take a safe ride should never be inhibited by whether or not you have to leave your car or how you're going to get it the next morning. So we really want to make sure that we capitalize on what Ramride Return can be and move forward with making it a better program.
Ramride's a great program here at CSU, something that can always be improved, we believe. Specifically, we need to get individuals involved in Ramride, and that comes to advertisement. You really got to get out to the students, and you got to personally invite them to come, and you have to advertise to them what incentives it's bringing them and what benefits are bringing the university as a whole. I think we need to get student orgs much more involved in Ramride, such as the Greek organizations. I think that's something that they'd really be interested in, and the lacrosse team, football team, just a lot of student organizations, leaders on this campus involved in Ramride, and you'll see the ripple effect. We do want to retire Ramride Return. We don't think it's used properly, and it's not used efficiently. Your student fees are being wasted. On another note, next morning when you wake up, you still have alcohol in your system from the previous night, so then we are encouraging students to drive with alcohol in their system, which is endangering not only the CSU community, but the Fort Collins community as a whole. On another note, we would like to implement Ramride for home football games. Obviously, Hughes serves alcohol, and people are tailgating out there, and it's very dangerous for students to be drinking and driving, and we know it happens. It also can cut down on congestion, but the overall safety aspect, we believe, is instrumental to CSU and the Fort Collins community.
According to very conservative figures, the current administration is set to leave a nearly $90,000 rollover in funds. How will this factor into your administration's budget? And do you think that having rollovers like this is beneficial for student government? I know that both of you talked about maximizing student fees, and those rollovers are student money, so.
Having that extra money will just allow us to give students more resources than before. And so being able to capitalize on that amount of money will just be able to be something else that we give back to students. I think it's a really great thing for organizations to have rollover, simply because it allows for stability in an organization, and you never know where a financial turn might happen, and being prepared for that is just being fiscally responsible.
Regina, that's a great point. Speaking in terms of crises that happen in the ASCSU budget, we think that rollover, we can definitely optimize every dollar being spent and put in money, like you said, to programs that benefit students, such as the Student Funding Board budget. And we want to increase that. You saw that on our campaign platform. We want to allow students to be able to come to our board, say, hey, we need this money to put on this program that's going to benefit CSU. We want to see that happen. And that rollover was definitely Eric's administrations. They did a great job on that and setting up CSU for success in the future. Do I think that we should maybe reevaluate in the future if that rollover is consistently that high? Yes.
All right, and so this next question is specifically for John and Max. Increasing tuition is arguably the biggest concern on the minds of CSU students, and yet your campaign platforms don't have any mention of addressing the issue. Why should CSU students vote for a ticket that doesn't prioritize their largest worry?
I think we wouldn't be running for this position if we weren't concerned about students' tuition and increase. I think it's a general concern at CSU that it's the #1 issue and that we need to tackle that. I think that it's just generally known that we need to stop the increase on tuition here at CSU. So we wanted to focus on some other things that separated us from other candidates in terms of what our campaign platform stood for and what we allowed for students to really view us as. And Max can hit a little more on that too.
Yeah, I agree with John in the fact that it's a common goal for all students to keep tuition down. That's just common sense. What I think our platform is trying to achieve is we're trying to look to cut money from student spending in other areas. And that's what we're also focusing on. You can't really start saying you're going to cut tuition until you've seen, the Colorado State's budget, until you've seen the actual state of Colorado, their budget, what sort of money we're going to be getting. So saying that you want to cut tuition or lower tuition, you have to see the projections first. That's just basic finance. So what we want to focus on as soon as possible is areas where we can actually lower students that are in our control, not in the greater budget of other organizations that are above us, so to speak.
And this one's for Regina and Joe. Many of your campaign promises kind of involve reflecting the student opinion more so than advocating for some of kind of your own stances. And your opponents, by contrast, do kind of have stances on issues like the stadium. Why is this? Why did you guys choose this strategy?
In order to be a good representative of the students, you have to keep as many of the student voices in mind. So that's our biggest motivation for that. We might have our own personal opinions about certain issues, but if we want to be good representatives, we have to make sure that we can represent as many different voices on campus. So if that comes down to the on-campus stadium, we acknowledge that there are going to be two different sides to that, and we acknowledge that we need to be representative of those as well. And by being representatives, I think that we are advocates. When we know what students want and when we're able to be that voice, we can advocate for what that is at whatever level that may be. So if it's for a fee increase, if it's for tuition at the state level, or anything with the Board of Governors, we can advocate for that by being a good student voice.
All right, we have another question for both groups. What measures will you put in place to prevent the employment of someone who maybe has a questionable employment background? And what would you do if a similar situation as to one that happened earlier this year were to arise?
To prevent issues that have happened in previous administrations, I think it is instrumental to the ASCSU organization to conduct background checks. Is it tedious? Is it time consuming? Yes. Is it necessary? Most definitely. What would we have done in the situation earlier? I think Eric handled that very well in keeping the publicity as low as it could be, and in terms of ASCSU and how people positively view that. And we probably would have done something very similar, and we removed him from the organization as soon as possible, but also worked with him on a personal level to make sure he was doing all right in that whole process that is involved in the legal system.
So I think that what happened was an extremely isolated incident. I think that there is an opportunity for background checks, but I think that with the timeline that we're given to hire individuals, we physically don't have the time to conduct a background check because it takes so long. I think that reflects a lot on how Joe and I are going to have to interview people. We're going to have to be extremely careful with the questions that we ask, make sure that the people that we're hiring are people that we trust. We just have to be, it goes down to coming on us, so making sure that every person that we hire is somebody who we would put our name on the line for. And that just goes with how we're going to conduct everything. What would we have done in the same situation? We would have, made sure that students understood first that none of their money was taken. We would have ensured that students knew everything that was going on, making sure that we're being very transparent, and also trying to reestablish that trust that you need to have in a student government.
And one of the chief roles of the ASCSU president is to serve as CSU's student representative on the Board of Governors. How will you ensure that you just make a good impression on the behalf of students to the Board of Governors, and what would you like to bring to the board's attention, and kind of how would you make a difference?
So as far as the Board of Governors go, it's the governing body over all three systems of Colorado State. So CSU Fort Collins, CSU Pueblo, and the global campus. And we would make sure that we were a professional and a legitimate student voice. And that comes down to making sure that we're informed, that we're just being professional. I've got experience in that as far as my position this year. I've been able to be in a lot of conversations, get to meet a lot of professionals, and personally, I've developed my professionalism, and I'm able and confident to represent that student voice to the Board of Governors. Things that we would bring up would definitely be tuition concerns. If we don't advocate for that at the Board of Governors, then we're not doing our job. We need to make sure that we're really responsive to that. We understand also that people might be thinking about a vote on the Board of Governors. We understand that that's going to be a really time-consuming process, and that we wouldn't want to promise that if we couldn't guarantee it. We understand that it would take a long time, and we're willing to put in that time and that work to make sure that the student voice is legitimate and that we work towards that. Whether or not we can promise a vote, we wouldn't want to do that in an effort to keep our word.
All right, and this one is for Max specifically. I know that you've never been involved in ASCSU before, and the vice president is tasked with chairing the Senate and also kind of serving on a bunch of committees and stuff. How would you gain the institutional knowledge to just effectively fill this role before your term begins?
Right. Well, there's two parts to that question. First is understanding simply Robert's Rules of Orders. I deal with that every Monday. My fraternity follows the same rules. Every organization you're part of, if you want to have meetings, proper quorum, you need to follow Robert's Rules of Orders. I have those down. I understand exactly how they work. Again, proper quorum. Now, when it comes to actually understanding Senate, looking through the Green Book, that's something, it's a 117-page book. I can learn that in 2 weeks. I plan on, if I am elected, staying here for the summer and learning it all, understanding the system. I mean, it's relatively simple. It's you know, your regular legislative system based off of the federal system as well as our state system, and so I don't think it would be that challenging. The learning curve isn't too high, and really, you know, frankly, I'm not concerned about it. I wouldn't have ran for this position if I thought it was going to be something that was really a challenge to me. So.
All right, and this next question is specifically for Regina and Joe. You discussed creating student forums to solicit feedback from different organizations on campus. How will you ensure that there is enough interest and attendance to ensure that these forums truly do reflect the multifaceted elements of the student voice?
I think the biggest part of that is going to go into marketing and making sure that students understand that that is something that's happening on campus. I think one of the biggest problems right now is that students understand that organizations meet and that student organizations exist for their benefit, but they're not well informed enough on how to get involved in those student organizations or how to get the information on that. So making sure that students have access to that information and increasing RAM pride as well so that students want to get involved. They want to be a better part of CSU and know what it means to be a proud RAM.
And in addition, I think that when you're a leader of an organization, if you have passion for what you're doing, I think that is reflected every day in what you're doing. So if we were passionate and if we could inspire that in other people, I think that would just get a lot more involvement in the student forums. So ensuring that passion that we keep talking about is visible and it's something tangible in something like a student forum.
And this is for both of you. So what knowledge and experience do you have when it comes to higher education funding in Colorado? Previous administrations have played a huge role in kind of advocating for CSU students when it comes to funding from the state level. How will you continue doing this, and what priorities do you have when it comes for lobbying for students during your tenure?
I'm a college student, so I haven't been actually involved in any specific legislation. Specifically, though, I think some higher education funding things that need to be relevant and unknown to the CSU campus are Tabor, the Gallagher Amendment, House Bill. I have some notes right here actually on it. But we really need to be knowledgeable, and we need to push the Colorado State Legislature to keep the students in mind, because when things get passed, like such as property taxes and other rates like that, they are affecting students in their everyday lives. Specifically, experience, like I said, just really you have to know your stuff and you have to study. Current administration, they do really well working with the Colorado State Legislature and ensuring the best interests of the students. Chase does a really good job with that, and I'd like to find someone if we elected our administration that not only does that, but obviously improves as well.
Right, so John touched a little bit on Tabor and the Gallagher Amendment. So Tabor, the Taxpayer Bill of Rights, was created in 1992 in an effort when Colorado was seeing a lot of economic prosperity, and it only allows for an increase in taxes from a popular vote. In order to work with that and work with the Gallagher Amendment, we would really have to make sure that state legislators were informed of the student perspective, on both of those issues. So addressing things like Tabor, the Gallagher Amendment, and all the other bills that are going through both the House and the Senate right now in response to funding for higher education.
All right, so we have another question for both. What do you think about ASCSU's current structure, and what would you recommend changing, and what do you think works?
So right now, I think that there are a lot of people that work in ASCSU. I think that everyone's doing a really great job. However, I think that in order for us to set ourselves up for success, we need to cut down on employment. And that comes down to us being able to lead a good group of individuals, as well as making sure that the things that we promise can get done. We want to really inspire all of the people that we work with to be able to achieve all of these things, and that's just more manageable with less people. We also want to make sure that we're keeping students in mind as far as salaries go, and making sure that the student budget, our budget wouldn't be too much towards salaries and more towards making sure that things get done for students.
Along with Regina, we want to cut the payroll. We want to focus on that. And there's some positions in ASCSU I think that should be eliminated. The current structure, yes, provides a lot of job opportunities for students, but at the same time, it's affecting other students that don't have those jobs, increasing those student fees. We want to establish a set salary for director positions, associate director positions. The current setup is not like that, and I think it's not beneficial to the organization as a whole, and we'd really like to set that up. The structure, I think, internally, it's been working for a few years. I think it's become stagnant, and that's something we want to reevaluate.
And this is just a follow-up for both of you. You both mentioned kind of cutting some positions. Do you have any specific ideas about what positions or departments you'd like to see cut?
We'll go. So I think that we personally need to look at the cabinet structure before we say for sure what we would want to cut. And I don't know that it would be necessarily cut from last year, but reorganizing it completely to where it's something brand new and something that we think is the most effective. And how many deputies that is, or how many directors and departments that would be something that we would have to look at and take a better look at.
The current proposed budget by Eric's administration has a few set positions that were suggested to be cut. We would take those into high consideration, as well as looking at our own. We have to evaluate it within our cabinet and really take a look at what's benefiting the students most and what's not benefiting them.
All right, this question is for John and Max. One of your campaign promises involves working to acquire more Scantron machines. How are you going to pay for these, and why will these be effective in ensuring faster test results?
I think currently we all know that there is a problem with receiving test results. You know, oftentimes during finals week, midterms week, it takes a longer amount of time to receive your test results back. And I think that is a problem for students who are trying to project out their grades. We're going to work with the proper organizations to find ways to increase the amount of Scantrons. Through what channels we're going to do that, you know, we're going to look into that. If it means increasing Scantrons, increasing jobs, we think that would be big. We know that we do have room in our budget for things like that. We know we can fundraise for that, and we can go to different organizations in the administration and find the proper funding for that. So it's not really a worry of funding. You know, if you look at it, Scantrons, they're costly machines, but over time, it seems like they pay themselves off in regards to how they affect the student population. So is funding a worry of ours? No. Will we figure it out in the future? Of course, and I don't think that is a major concern for us. So.
And this one's for Regina and Joe. One of your campaign promises says that you want to ensure student voices are heavily weighted during the on-campus stadium discussion process. And I'm sure, as you guys know, they've sent out polls to students. Eric's on the same advisory committee. How else do you think students need to get their voices heard when it comes to this proposal, and what will you do about it?
I think a lot of that can come from our most directly representative body, which is the Senate. And I think that having senators go out and receive that message from their constituents, find out what their concerns are, while at the same time we're attending those meetings, finding out what's going to work, what's not going to work, relaying that message to students, making sure that they're as informed as possible so that when senators do reach out to those students, that the students have the most informed position possible to make to relay to their senators to then pass some kind of resolution taking a stance on it. And I'd like to see that resolution put forward in the very near future. If it's not going to happen from another senator by the end of this semester, then it will happen from me.
All right, this is another question for both. Voter turnout and overall student enthusiasm for ASCSU elections is pretty low. How will you market ASCSU and demonstrate its significance to the student body?
You see us out on the plaza every day right now, and what we stress to kids who say, I'm not voting this year is, the decisions that we're making are directly affecting them. This is our university. We are One Ram Nation, and you really got to stress that, and you have to be excited and have a positive attitude. The ASCSU organization controls what a lot of things that are happening here in our university, in our house. So you got to really stress that to students, relay that to students in a positive way, and I think that's when really you get people being proactive.
I would agree with John in saying that if we're not positive on the plaza, that we're not really representing ASCSU well, we want to make sure that students don't dread the 2.5 weeks that we're standing on the plaza, but they're excited about getting a handbill and excited about the next administration and what they want to bring to campus. So that comes down to Joe and I and everybody that's been helping us to be passionate about what we're doing, and at the end of the day, saying make sure you vote rather than vote for Regina and Joe. We want to make sure that we stress the importance of voting and having an engaged student body, and that goes back to us being good representatives. As far as if we don't have as many voices as possible, we can't be those representatives that we're striving to be.
And this is another one for both of you. So both of you mentioned the on-campus stadium and your campaign promises, and just because it's something kind of at the forefront of students' minds, I'd like you to elaborate on the issue a little bit and just tell me kind of what your stance is on the stadium and what you think that relationship should be between athletics and academics at our university.
Yeah, as everyone would know, who's looked over our initiatives, is we are pro-stadium. We started off in the beginning saying we're going to take a stance on this because we did note that ASCSU wasn't planning on it, be that for various reasons. We wanted to take a stance to ensure the security of student fees. We feel like whatever decision the administration makes, we want to help them and cause less friction. How we see it is, if they are set on building this stadium, if we stand back and we say, no, we don't want a stadium, what that's going to cause is a cut in the communication. What we want to do is work with the administration and say, listen, if you're going to build the stadium, we don't want it on green space, we don't want it blocking the mountains, and we don't want it taking up student fees. And we think if we can be more agreeable with them, that will help students in the long run. When it comes to academics and sports in our community, we think that athletics are a big part of our community. You see thousands of kids go to the basketball game every weekend. Thousands of kids go to the football game every weekend. That's a huge thing, but you can never forget exactly what we are, and that's a learning institution. When you say the stadium we're sort of ignoring academics, well, I think a lot of people forget what's this other construction going on around campus. We're building new facilities, the new engineering building, the new study cube at the library. We're not simply ignoring academics, but we do want to bring on a new era of athletics too. I think that would provide more visibility on the national level.
In addition to that, I think an on-campus stadium would bring more money to the school in the long run. You see at big schools in the Big Ten and the SEC, alumni donating to winning schools who have on-campus stadiums, and we think that this first step in deciding that we want an on-campus stadium, we are in support, is the right step into ensuring that more money is being put into this university. And that affects your degrees in the future on how employers will look at your degree when they see that Colorado State University and say, oh, I know who that is, I know what they stand for.
First, we want to make sure that students are completely informed about all the decisions that are being made and what goes into that decision. So where would it be built? How much would it cost? Where would we park? All of those different things that go into that decision. Once students are informed, we would want to poll the students, get the student feel for what they think, and then express that to the administration. If it's a yes, we want to support that. If it's a no, we want to support that, but we also acknowledge that there can be two different sides. So if it's a yes, we can also say to the administration, we support you and we want to work with you in this, but here are 7 student concerns that we really hope to address. And then as far as the relationship goes with administration and making this decision, it has to be a collaboration. It can't be an us versus them. It has to be something where we work together. If it's us versus them and we're constantly fighting them, we'll just be spinning our wheels and won't get anything done that we need to. And the relationship between academics and athletics is extremely important, and I think that being a RAM can mean different things to different students. For some people, it's going to athletic events as well as going to the library and studying for a test. But for some students, going to an athletic event isn't where their passions are, and we recognize that, and we want to make sure that we facilitate whatever it means to be a CSU RAM for everyone on campus.
All right, this next question is for Regina and Joe. What sort of space do you envision for students to discuss tuition and fees? In front of who? And would it be you and Joe, or would it be in front of CSU administration?
So this deals directly with the student forums that we were talking about and going out and actively engaging in that student opinion. Now, as chair of the Student Fee Review Board, obviously I would have to facilitate that conversation between the 15 voting members on that board. But as far as student input goes, outside of that board, in the forums, that would be Regina and I only, and that would be closed from administrators so that students could feel welcome to voice their opinions without consequence and be able to voice their opinions without feeling the pressures of having administrators in the room breathing down their neck or feeling like they couldn't voice their opinions without having consequence. However, on the Student Fee Review Board, there will be administrators in the room, but being able to facilitate that conversation in a manner that is conductive of safe argumentation is really something that needs to happen. So having those forums that are closed to administrators and then having a safe conversation that is open to administrators at the Student Fee Review Board.
And this one is for you too. So you guys mentioned advocating for a textbook sales tax exemption. And correct me if I'm wrong, this isn't something that can be handled at the university level. How then would you plan on negotiating for this during your tenure?
So our biggest thing when it comes to this sales tax on the textbook is lobbying in the state capitol. We, of course, have a lobbyist on our payroll that would help us. But what we're thinking is we coordinate with different schools around the state. And we start lobbying as students around the state. And we lobby for this tax exemption from sales tax. And so we think really we can get other schools behind this. And we know if we bring this to Capitol Hill and we say, look, this would save students a substantial amount of money when they're spending $2,000 a year on textbooks. I think senators, politicians would agree with that. And I think we would all see that as a solution to one of the problems of students lacking money.
This next question is for everyone. What do you think this year's administration has done successfully, and what do you think could have been improved upon?
So I think that ASCSU this year did a lot of great things. I think that there are a few platforms that were left undone. I think that some of the biggest things are improving Ramride. I think that there's a really great system in there now for an incentive for volunteers and for those who are the director in charge and the assistant director in charge each night. I think that they've made great strides as far as relationships with the city. I think that the late night bus route is evidence of that. The fact that there's respect for CSU students comes a lot from how ASCSU has handled all of those relationships this year. There's just a lot of great things that the administration did. And again, we just want to make sure that we continue the great tangible things and also capitalize a lot on relationships and collaboration between all different populations.
If I could elaborate just a little bit on that, I think that this administration has done a phenomenal things for the student body. And a lot of that is behind the scenes kind of work, things with the budget, stretching student fee money to go above and beyond what it could ever possibly be with any other administration. Students pay $35.92 every year for an ASCSU fee, and every cent of that has been well utilized this year, I feel. And the thing that could be improved upon the most, I think, is student representation, especially at the legislative level. Because like I said, we only have currently 21 voting members in Senate out of 36 seats. So being able to fill those seats would be an improvement, and being able to bring that representation back.
Echoing Joe and Regina, I believe ASCSU has done a phenomenal job in representing Colorado State University. I think some of the highlights of this administration in ASCSU has been optimizing the ASCSU budget, as well as the student fees in regards to that ASCSU student fee. Areas that I think that can be improved on, I think that, as Joe said, we need to increase Senate. If Senate's going to function properly and in the best of its ability, there needs to be a full Senate, or it's really just not, we're not going anywhere, we're not going in places we need to be going. We need to be available to students. That office is intimidating when you walk in. We need to change the culture of that, and I think that starts with physically coming out on the plaza, physically going to students, student organizations, and shaking their hands and saying, I'm here to listen.
And here's another one for both of you guys. Last year, Eric and Rachel had nearly 40 campaign promises. Neither of you guys have nearly that amount. Why is that?
I think it's over.
There was a lot of great ideas last year. The reason we didn't have as many is because if elected, we want to hit the ground running with things that we know can accomplish right away. We believe having that many objectives spreads yourself too thin, and we really want to optimize and focus on the features and benefits of what we propose to students if elected. Those are big issues that affect students directly, and at the time of election, having that many issues, that takes time to get all those done. And we understand we're only in office for 1 year, and that is why we only selected to have a few of those, so we can make a difference right away.
And we have another question for John and Max. You mentioned increasing the SFB budget. Where will funds to do this come from? Which budgetary areas would you recommend cutting if necessary?
Once again, thanks to Eric, there are no necessary funds to cut, and it would come directly from rollover.
So one of the things you talk about is kind of getting more students involved in SFRB. And I think being in ASCSU, you've kind of noticed how difficult it is to get students to care. How will you get students to just get involved in SFRB and voice their opinions when it comes to their fees?
Sure, yeah. And again, I'd like to touch on the fact that I feel like students don't have access to all the information necessarily to become involved. And I think making that information accessible, but not only accessible, but readily available by directly providing that information to students. So going out to those student organizations, going to the residence halls, being on the plaza, being open and available at all times while we're actively pursuing that involvement, so that students know what's happening and they know how they can get involved, and they know that their vote on that board is huge. It's only 15 voting members right now, so every single vote counts, and they go directly towards your student fees. As far as coming out of your wallet, I think if students knew that they could become involved in that process and make those kinds of decisions, they'd be much more apt to try and become involved.
All right, we have another question for everyone. What would your relationship with the Collegian and other media outlets look like? How will you maintain a high level of transparency?
So we think that making sure that the Collegian has all kinds of information all the time. So nobody should ever have to guess at what we're doing. We should be really transparent with everything we're doing, constantly telling them every time that there's a student forum, every time that we're making big decisions, in order to make sure that students are completely informed. It's, the newspaper for campus, that's something that really affects everybody. So making sure that we are constantly in contact with them And also, you know, having a relationship where it's, you know, it's friendly and not, you know, two people or an us versus them, more of a collaboration in how we can best inform students of what's going on.
And here's another one for both of you guys. Oh, I'm sorry.
I think Max and I want to stress that relationship. We all know in today's society, media is huge, and that's how people get their information. We want to stress positivity. I think positivity and that goes a long way in building those type of relationships where the decisions you make are being publicized to the rest of the university. And I'd really want to stress to those media outlets that be positive, and we are one university. It's not an us versus them. We're one Colorado State University, one Ram Nation. And I think that would go a very long way in creating the most mutually beneficial relationship.
Yeah, and then one question for both of you guys. Sorry to cut you off there. So what I'm kind of wondering is, our student fees are more than basically any other university in the state, and they've increased faster than any other university in the state. So what do you plan on doing? Because we have SFRB as this entity that gives students a role, but it looks like from the data it's not necessarily succeeding. How would you change things there to make sure student fees are at least on track with other schools in Colorado?
Well, Colorado State First is better than any university in the state of Colorado. So I think you have to advertise that to the students as well. But I take pride in students wanting to be involved in their student organizations. I think that's cool. They're taking something and making it their college experience. However, you want to get students involved, and you need to promote to them that, hey, these fees are increasing at a drastic rate. It's your responsibility to get involved and make sure that the best decisions here are being made. And Max is going to hit a little bit on it too, I think.
I also think when student fees come in the future, you know, we want to bring in a new perspective. And with that, we understand that it is tough economic times. And we want to say, if a student fee passes through the Student Fee Review Board, it has to be necessary. It can't be because some organization did poor accounting, had bad revenue, things like that. We want to make sure it's only necessary to the survival of different organizations. And I think that'd be huge, instead of just letting everything through because we feel bad for organizations.
Yeah, I think that really students are overwhelmingly opposed to increasing student fees on campus, and that's why I just drafted a resolution 4106, which urged the members of the Student Fee Review Board and fee areas seeking an increase to seek other avenues for their funding without having to raise that student fee. So right now I'm actively pursuing keeping those student fees down. However, next year I think it's really going to be a matter of involvement, and CSU is one of the few institutions in the state that even offers this voice. A lot of student fee areas for other universities are decided upon by administration and faculty, and students don't even get to weigh in on these issues. So making sure that students are aware that they can weigh in on these issues, and again, making sure that they know how to do that if they choose to do that, and making that a safe place for them to voice those opinions.
All right, this question is for Regina and Joe. You discussed making sure that construction projects are in line with student voice. Could you elaborate on that? And funding and timelines of construction projects are already available on CSU's website and is public information. How do you plan then on distributing this information to students, and why does it matter? Sorry, that was kind of a long question.
No, you're fine. So I think that ensuring or making sure that students' voices are heard on the boards and the committees that are making those decisions is really important. So pushing for a student voice on as many of those decisions as we possibly can is really going to be important to us. We want to make sure that students have their voices heard when big decisions are made that's ultimately going to come out of our pockets. Everything is on a website right now, but we want to make sure that we emphasize that, make that information that much more easy to access, as well as making sure that students just know what's going on.
And this next question is for John and Max. So you mentioned U+2 reform in your campaign promises, which is something that you hear a lot from every ASCSU presidential ticket. how do you guys plan on making a change where other administrations failed and kind of reforming this?
So one of the biggest things we want to do is create a U+2 liaison. You've probably heard about that in our initiatives. The idea behind this is creating a position in our cabinet that would actually open up the channel of communication with us directly and the city. What we're hoping is not to necessarily abolish the U+2 law, as we know the city loves it. What we really want to do is find some way to help students who can't afford to live in a 3-person home to find cheaper housing. And that's, be it, ways for students who are responsible to find permits to live in houses that can fit more than 3 people, things like that that would really work with the city and the city would agree with. Of course, we're not simply going to get rid of the law. That's impossible. But we want to find some way to provide students with cheap housing, some sort of permit, something along that lines that really does achieve that.
And we're now kind of starting to wind down, so I'd like to ask if both groups maybe have some closing remarks that they'd like to end with, starting with Regina and Joe.
So I think that the biggest thing that we want to stress, again, is our motivation for what we're doing. Both of us are extremely passionate about student voice and being relevant to what students want from a student government. If elected, we would be out on the plaza, we would be reaching out to residence halls, constantly reaching out to populations that are sometimes ignored. We want to be the administration that's the most responsive to student need and set up at ASCSU for that in the future. We have a vision that ASCSU can be a student government that everyone can relate to, and we want to make sure that we set that up for the future.
Max and I love Colorado State University and being a CSU Ram. We are your everyday student. We feel that we know that we will take firm stances when the best interest of Colorado State and its students are threatened. And we know that this next year is going to be very hard economically, and we want to optimize every student dollar that is put into this university, and that the students are receiving the best quality of service from the state and from our university.
Apologize, that didn't take as long as we'd planned. So we now have a few minutes to fill. I think we can maybe give one more question to each group and then a quick wrap up.
Sorry about that, guys.
You ready, Elliot?
Yeah, let's see. Actually, there was one thing kind of both of you guys talked about, and this is for both of you. You both talked about kind of creating an online version of the test file. This seems like definitely a huge undertaking, like a lot of uploading and creating a database. What's that workflow going to look like?
So we think that first it's going to start with a relationship with faculty and making sure that we build up the test file so that there are tests that are relevant to the classes that students are taking. So first working on that relationship. And we do acknowledge that there are a lot of, that there's going to be a lot of work that goes into it. But again, like we've said, because we're passionate about student voice and making sure that we capitalize on student resources, we're ready to do that work.
Like you pointed out, it is going to be a lot of work, but it's and something that affects students and affects them in the way we want it to. It does take a lot of work, and I think that's something we know and acknowledge. Like Regina said, it all begins with the relationship with faculty and the people who are in charge of operating RamWeb and RamCT and other things like that. And there's a lot of communication involved, and that's something that...
Apologize, we're about out of time. We may have to cut you off there for that part, and
right,
as
we'll
we go off air,
Rams.
we can let you finish.
Yeah.
But we'd like to thank everyone for coming out again.
Thanks again for tuning in to this year's ASCSU presidential debate. And not to worry if you missed anything, we'll be broadcasting it on CTV 11 up until Wednesday, April 4th. You can watch it at 1 p.m. or again at 7 p.m.
Yep, and you can also find a link on our website at ctv11.com. Don't forget to vote for your student government president. You can do this by logging into RamWeb on April 2nd. And remember that the voting closes at April 4th because that's when results will be released.
And don't forget to watch CTV 11 on Wednesday, April 4th. We'll be broadcasting live from the Senate chambers with the election results. Once again, I'm Katie Spencer.
And I'm Hannah Tran. Happy voting.